All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. We all deal with stress, right? Anxiety, sorrow, the whole shebang. But how often do we actually stop, pop the hood, and look at the exact machinery creating those feelings? Well, today, we're going to break down the actual logical structure of why we suffer psychologically. And, much more importantly, we're going to look at how we can completely dismantle that structure. So let's start with a really provocative hypothesis straight from our source material. What if complete freedom from all sorrow is logically available to anyone as long as they're willing to stop fighting shadows? I know, that sounds almost too good to be true, maybe even a bit of an exaggeration. But the premise here is super interesting. It argues that just like germs can live in our bloodstream without making us sick if our immune system is strong enough, the inevitable problems of life can exist without causing us all this internal agony. We just have to develop a very specific kind of mental clarity.
Okay, so to actually get to this freedom, there's absolutely a crucial first step. We have to clearly separate the physical facts of a situation from our internal psychological reactions. This is the foundation of everything we're talking about today. The external problems, those are physical facts. Maybe your car breaks down or, you lose your wallet. Undeniable physical realities. But the inner agitation, that knot in your stomach, the stress, that is a purely psychological reaction. And while we obviously can't always fix the physical fact right away, the psychological reaction is actually entirely within our control.
To really nail down the difference here, picture this story from the text. Imagine you're on a long train journey. The car is packed, and there are these two young kids just absolutely running wild. They're hitting people, bouncing off the seats, causing a massive disruption. The passengers are getting furious. Now, the physical fact here is the disruption, but the psychological reaction is the intense, boiling anger everyone feels toward these kids and their dad, who is just sitting there doing nothing. But then the father finally speaks up. He apologizes, and he explains that they are actually on their way to a hospital to retrieve the body of the children's mother, who was just killed in a horrible accident. He admits he's just in shock and literally doesn't know how to tell them or handle them right now.
Boom. Instantly, all that anger from the passengers just melts into deep compassion. Now think about this. The kids didn't stop misbehaving. They were still running around, being loud. The physical problem, the actual nuisance, didn't change one single bit. But the psychological suffering and agitation of the passengers, it completely vanished, just like that, because their perspective shifted. This totally proves that our emotional pain isn't locked to external events. We can actually be free from that psychological knot, even if the physical problem is still staring us in the face.
Moving right along to section 1, the mind's mirage. Let's distinguish reality from fabrication and see how our brain literally conjures anxiety out of thin air. So the text categorizes everything our mind processes into two buckets: wakeful objects and dream objects. Wakeful objects are just the physical facts we deal with practically. It's perception without bewilderment. Like if you're driving and you see one of those heat mirages on the road, but you know it's just a mirage, that's a wakeful object. You're not confused by it. But dream objects, those are imaginary anxieties that cause very real stress. It's when we look at something with bewilderment and treat a total fabrication of our own mind like it's a terrifying absolute reality. Let's make this real. Imagine you get a call that a close relative is in the hospital. Your functional mind, the part dealing with wakeful objects, gets you in the car and navigates the road safely. But your imagination? Oh, it beats you to the hospital. Before you even park the car, your mind is already creating a dream object. You're imagining the doctor giving you awful news, you're picturing the worst-case scenario, you are sitting there experiencing heavy, exhausting, very real anxiety for an event that literally hasn't even happened. You're basically suffering over a ghost. And this leads to a pretty massive realization. Fighting these fabricated dream objects is exactly like trying to bury a shadow by throwing dirt on it. Think about it. You can dig a hole, toss the dirt, cover it all up, and the shadow is just going to fall right on top of the fresh dirt. Our mind's anxieties are shadows. Realizing that fighting them is a complete waste of energy, that's the actual success we're aiming for here. It's a completely meaningless, unwinnable war. But, if fighting is useless, what's actually fueling this everyday misery? Let's check out section 2, the engine of suffering, and look at something called the attitude of denial. The text points the finger at this attitude of denial as the ultimate culprit. And it's this crazy logical paradox we totally trap ourselves in. Step 1, something bad happens, say a really expensive item breaks. Step 2, our mind immediately and illogically demands that it shouldn't have happened. We literally deny the factual reality of the present moment. Step 3, that friction between reality and our impossible demand creates psychological sorrow. But here is the absolute kicker. Step 4. We then frantically deny the sorrow itself. We hate feeling sad, so we try to destroy the sadness. We are denying the exact reaction that our first denial just created. It's just this vicious, exhausting, never-ending cycle.
To really grasp how this denial traps us, we need to look at Section 3, the subconscious loop. Let's map out exactly how this factory in our mind operates. Now, naturally, a psychological feeling really only lasts a fraction of a second. Imagine dropping a metal bowl onto a tile floor. It makes this loud, sharp dink sound, right? And then silence. The sound only existed for a tiny fraction of a second. The absolute only way to make that sound continuous is if you keep picking the bowl up and smashing it into the floor over and over. Well, our feelings are exactly the same way. They are totally momentary. The only reason they feel continuous is because we are artificially and repeatedly renewing them by struggling against them. So here is how the factory floor actually operates. First, we start with an incident that just happened. Let's call that A. Now, this incident merges with our thought about the incident, our denial that it should have happened. We'll call that B. Together, A and B activate the subconscious mind, which we'll call C. And the subconscious just does what it's conditioned to do. The output? A physical manifestation of sorrow. The machine has officially produced its product.
But wait, it gets worse. Notice how this cycle just feeds itself? We don't just feel that initial sorrow and move on. No, because of our attitude of denial, we generate a brand new thought, a thought against the sorrow itself. I can't stand this pain. I shouldn't feel this way. So now, the thought against the incident and this new thought against the sorrow are both continuously looping back and feeding the subconscious mind. The result? Renewed sorrow, over and over. We are literally artificially prolonging our own suffering just by constantly fighting it. Which brings us to the way out, Section 4, the frictionless mind, and the counterintuitive solution to all this pain, the knot of understanding. So how on earth do we break the loop? Well, the secret is almost backwards. We have to realize there is absolutely nothing to attain psychologically. See, our conscious mind is constantly projecting into the future, right? Always trying to grab onto pleasure or run away from pain. But the exact moment we deeply, truly understand that there is no perfect internal state we can force ourselves into, the mind just stops fighting itself. The whole desire to manipulate how we feel just collapses.
Think about it like slamming the brakes on a car that's going incredibly fast. Stripped of all that forward momentum, the car is going to violently spin around and change direction automatically. You don't even have to touch the steering wheel. It's the exact same thing with our brain. When we drop that demand to attain some specific feeling, the struggling mind automatically spins around into this frictionless, actionless state. It just stops projecting into tomorrow and finally actually rests in the present.
And this whole realization boils down to something called psychological renunciation. Now, that doesn't mean giving up on life or anything. It just means abandoning the internal struggle against our own feelings. When an emotion pops up, even a really painful one, we just stop contradicting it. We don't try to block it, and we don't try to desperately cling to it. When we stop building these massive dams of denial, our experiences just flow perfectly unobstructed. They pop up, they last for a fraction of a second, and they vanish, flowing away like a river. So we're wrapping up this explainer, and I want to leave you with this massive shift in perspective. All that psychological friction, the sheer exhaustion of your daily anxiety, it is literally just a war against a shadow. It's that attitude of denial just feeding the subconscious loop over and over again. So the only question left for us is this. Are you ready to stop struggling, drop the demand to change what you are feeling in this exact microsecond, and finally just let your mind flow free? Think about that the next time you feel that heavy dink of anxiety, and instead of picking the bull back up, just see what happens if you let it fade into silence.